Hello everyone, I'm really enjoying this book and I'm looking forward, might even go for more than a chapter this time. So we're on Dolphin's Song, which is the second book within this whole book. The book's in the Grange library. You know where to get it in September, whether we finish it or not, although I'm going to finish it, so it might not be in the Grange library right at the beginning of September. Let's go for it. We're on chapter 9. Late afternoon on their fifth day at sea, the wind began to make a keening noise like a pack of wolves. By dinner time, every heave of the ship sent crockery and knives and forks smashing and clashing, and orange fish soup stains were splattered across the tablecloths. It was hard to walk, let alone keep the food which had gone down from coming up again, and not everybody made it through the meal. Sherilyn was the first to go, triggering an exodus as she raced green-faced for the exit after the rolling ship and the discovery of a squid eye at the bottom of her bowl proved too much for her. Soon there were only a handful of children at the tables. Above their heads, light bulbs tinkled in their holders, and misshapen monster shadows chased one another around the walls. Martine, who felt fine, didn't fancy being trapped in a cabin with a seasick Sherilyn, nor did she want to hang around the recreation room where Claudius could be heard regaling anyone who would listen with stories about the time his family, who owned an ocean-going yacht which had once belonged to a Greek billionaire, had sailed through a hurricane in the Cayman Islands. The waves were 60 feet high, my father said. Son, your hands steadier than mine, so you take the wheel while I plot a course to keep us ahead of the storm's eye. Grimacing, Martine ducked out of the door and turned left along the swaying corridor to the galley. She was just in time to see Ben disappearing down the stairs to the engine room, and she smiled to herself. This had become their ritual. Every evening after dinner, when everyone else was watching DVDs or playing board games, she and Ben were in separate parts of the ship, talking to the crew. Ben's father was a sailor, and Ben adored boats and had anything to do with the sea, so Martine knew that he'd be learning how the sea kestrel worked. She, meanwhile, had become firm friends with Alberto, bonding over daily breakfasts of bacon and banana rolls and after-dinner treats of creme caramel dessert or coconut cake. On her third night on board, Martine had been unable to sleep because at dinner, Miss Faulkner had told her that she absolutely had to join the rest of the class when they were snorkeling and searching for dugongs in Mozambique. She wasn't interested in excuses. After that, the conversation at the table had moved on to shipwrecks and the many reasons ships sunk. So by the time Martine reached her bunk, all she could think about was the washing machine wave engulfing her and water pouring into her nose and mouth. She tossed and turned for what seemed like hours before giving up and creeping quietly out of the cabin, taking care not to rouse Sherilyn. Alberto wasn't in the galley, but she'd found him up on the deck, smoking and looking out over the inky sea. You look very troubled for one so young, was the chef's comment. Martine denied it at first, but after a long pause, she said, Alberto, were you ever afraid of the ocean or even just, of deep water? The chef smiled ruefully. Many times I've been scared on the dhows, the sailing boats which we use in the Bazaruto Islands. Many, many times. As a boy, especially. But my grandfather was a fisherman. One night, a cyclone swept through the islands of Bazaruto, uprooting palm trees and whipping up waves as big as houses. The dhow he was on overturned, leaving him and 4 others in the sea. But the dolphins, matahi we call them in our language, they surrounded them and protected them from the sharks. After this time, I was afraid no more. He studied Martine kindly. The sea kestrel is a big, solid ship, he said, in case she thought otherwise. It would take a bomb to sink her. They'd gone down to the galley after that, and Alberto had made her a mug of malted Milo, which he'd heated in a pot on the stove. Martine had felt a bit shy because the chef was a virtual stranger, and yet there she was in her pajamas, about to tell him things she couldn't even admit to her grandmother, but she knew instinctively he wouldn't think any less of her for them. When the hot, sweet Milo gave her courage to speak, she said, "I don't know what's wrong with me, Alberto. At Saubona, the game reserve where I live, I've ridden my giraffe at night with lions, hippos, and buffaloes. I've almost been bitten by a Cape cobra, escaped from poachers with guns, and been in underground caves with bats. Yet I've never been as afraid of any of those things as I am of deep water. I love the sardine run, and I especially love the dolphins, but I just don't feel at home on the ocean. I was okay when I thought I wouldn't have to go in the sea, but this evening Miss Faulkner told me that I absolutely have to go snorkeling when we reach Mozambique, and I'm scared that something will go wrong and I'll drown because I'm a terrible swimmer. Alberto, I'm the worst swimmer in the whole school." "I would be afraid of a giraffe if I saw one," Alberto replied somewhat confusingly. Martine was puzzled. "Why? Giraffes are the gentlest animals in the world. They'd never dream of hurting anyone, not unless they were trapped or threatened or protecting their young." "I'm sure you are right, but I've never been close to any wild animal apart from whales, dolphins, and dugongs, and I have never been in a safari park. I would be afraid because it is all unknown. You are afraid of the sea because you don't understand it. It's not familiar to you, so you shall know about it." On the night of the storm, Martine sat on the stainless steel bench in the galley, swinging her legs and listening to Alberta talk about what she thought of as island craft. Tendai had taught her bushcraft, vital tips and tricks to help her understand and survive the natural laws of the African savanna. And in some ways, the chef did the same for the marine environment of his homeland. "On Benguera," he said, bracing his legs against the rolling of the ship, which seemed to be worsening by the minute, "the children of fishermen learn from their earliest days to catch fish in many different ways, because their fathers believe it will teach them to know the sea's secrets and be grateful for the gifts that it provides. So they send each child out to catch his or her own pilot fish. A small fish which hitches rides with large fish like they are buses. When they find this pilot fish, they tie a fishing line around it and send it out to sea. When it attaches itself to a big fish, they reel it in, eat the big fish, and set the little one to work again." Alberta liked to hear about life on Saubona as well, so Martine told him about Tendai and about Grace's traditional medicine and her wonderful cooking. Alberta's local witch doctor, a young male Sangoma, was very different to Grace. According to the chef, he spent more time in a football shirt than a feather headdress, and he had never been known to say no to a lethal moonshine called palm wine. Alberta told her a story about a villager who'd once gone to him with a skull-splitting headache. The footballing witch doctor had started the treatment by putting a large pebble into his fire. While it was heating up, he blended herbs in a bowl made from special wood and engraved with a cross, then added water. When the stone was red hot, he dropped it into the bowl, causing the water to boil and turn green. After making a series of tiny incisions in the man's forehead, the witch doctor rubbed in a little of the herb potion and sent him home with the remainder in a bottle and the wooden bowl on his head. From that day on, no more headaches, Alberto said with a grin. Martine expressed what she hoped was the right amount of respectful admiration, while privately thinking that Grace was clearly a better traditional healer by miles, since her remedies were not based on hocus-pocus like putting bowls on people's heads, but had been tried and tested by all the grandmothers going back hundreds of years. She cast a critical eye over Alberto's smooth brown forehead. "Do you go to the witch doctor for headaches?" she asked. Alberto chuckled. "No, I prefer to take an aspirin." He was interrupted by a thunderbolt so ear-piercing it sounded as if the sea kestrel had collided with an iceberg. The ship bucked wildly. Martine flew off the stainless steel bench and hit the tiles with a painful smack. A split second later, a stack of plates sailed off a shelf and shattered against the bench in the exact spot where she'd been sitting. A confetti of sharp orange ceramic chips showered sparkly down on her head. Alberto helped her up, dusted white flecks of plate from her hair, and checked her for cuts and bruises, but he was no longer laughing. "Miss Martini," said darkly, "this is like the cyclone that nearly stole my grandfather. I have work to do to secure the galley. You must go now and stay close to your friends and your teachers." The ship was tossing violently, and both he and Martine were holding onto the bench for support. Martine felt a mounting sense of alarm. Unbidden, the shark and dolphin cave painting came into her head. What if she'd been mistaken and the picture had not been about the sardine run or the incident at Shark Alley? What if the prophecy was yet to be fulfilled? She said to Alberto. What makes you think this is a cyclone? Surely it's just a bad storm, and you told me that this was a big solid ship. You told me it would take a bomb to sink her. Just then, the siren began to wail.